You're listening to Refracted World with Terry Geo. Episode 13. What is love? I'm adding a small disclaimer to the beginning of this episode simply because I'm talking about love from a personal point of view. I only know the love I felt, and I only know the love of the people around me from what they've told me. And I'm a gay guy, so I can't speak for everyone, but I can talk about my own experiences, my own thoughts on love. And so if it doesn't apply to you or it doesn't resonate with you, then that's absolutely fine. But there may be something in this episode that does. And so I encourage you to listen. But always remember that this is just from my gay man's perspective. Okay, with that out of the way, let's quickly answer the question, what is love? We can do this very easily by looking at science papers, and the scientific reason for love is a biological one. So tens of thousands of years ago, we evolved to have this subconscious thought of love that pulls you and a partner together to produce offspring. It's just an evolutional way to keep humans procreating. But that's a very boring explanation of love, because for any of us who have actually been in love, it's very, very different. Love is intense. Love is incredible. Love is a brilliantly beautiful feeling. And it can also be incredibly hurtful, because love is also blind. So you can fall in love with the wrong person. And even if your friends and your family can see that they're the wrong person, you might not be able to, because you are so infatuated with that person. And a lot of us have been in those kind of relationships. We've been through those kind of people. And hopefully we've gotten out of those and learned more going into the next relationship. But that brings me on to my next point, which is love isn't singular. You will not just love one person your entire life. You can love many different people, not just people. You can love a car, you could love your job, you could love your desk, anything, your favorite mug, you love that mug. But being in love is a bit different. So love is powerful, but being in love is a connection between you and someone else. But that isn't singular either. You can be in a very serious, all-loving relationship that then X amount of time later breaks down, and you may think, well, will I ever find love again? And the answer is yes, because you don't just, even if you have all these intense feelings for one person, it doesn't mean that you will not have those intense feelings again for someone else. They will be slightly different because everyone is different. But you will not just love, I mean, you might do. You might meet someone at high school and stay with them till the day you die and never be in love with anyone else. And that might happen. But for the majority of us, that doesn't happen. And I think speaking about that, I think it's interesting when you look at the amount of people who got together with someone else. And I'm sure for many people, they either met in high school or college or university, and then they got together and then they stayed together. But that also means that it could be 10, 20 years down the line, you're filing for divorce. Because if you're meeting someone and settling down so young in your life, you don't get to experience all those things that you could have done. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because it's not. But I also believe that we as human beings, as we only get one life to live, now I'm in my 40s, I know that my teens and 20s were my learning years. So I now look back at my 20s and still put them in the same bundle as being a teenager. I was still a kid. And let's say until the age of 25, 27, when you actually start growing up properly. But for many people, especially men, maybe not so much women, but I can only speak from my point of view, we are still kids. We are still stupid, and we have no lived experience. We have no real life experience. And so I believe that we should enjoy our youth and maybe get into relationships, maybe, one relationship to the next, or maybe just have sexual relationships. There's nothing wrong with having sex. There's this big taboo about talking about sex or having many sexual partners. Why on earth? We're not Victorians anymore. we should be talking about sex more. We should be more open about our sex lives, and we should be having as much sex as we want. As long as it's safe and consensual, why shouldn't anybody be having sex? It's the most pleasure you will ever have as a human being. We all know this. And yet it's frowned upon in some societies, not in the gay. Okay, so it's not frowned upon in the gay scene at all. As a gay man, I can tell you now that we have a lot more sex than anyone else. And this is simply because whereas women are looking for the perfect partner to fertilize an egg, back to basics here, that was talking to tens of thousands of years ago, men are the ones looking to spread their seed to keep fertilization happening. And so when you have man on man, then of course it's going to include a lot more sex. And so there's no shame in the gay scene for however many sexual partners you've had. But I know many women who feel shame for having more than a few sexual partners in their life. Why? What is it with sexism? I really hate it. Why shouldn't anybody enjoy having sex? And if you want, it might not be for everyone, but if you want to have as many sexual partners as you can, then do it. Like I said, as long as it's safe and consensual, it has nothing to do with anyone else. And this whole shaming, oh, slut or whore or whatever, these awful, things that people say to you, why? Why should a man be able to sleep with however many women he wants or however many men he wants, but a woman, no, can't do it. No, it's just ridiculous. I hate it. Sex, most amazing thing we can all experience. So if you want to have more sex, then get more sex. And we all know that the likelihood of you getting more sex is when you're younger, because when we're younger, we're usually, the most active, the most good looking, the best hair, all these things, because we're still young, we're still growing up. And it's only when you get older that everything starts aching. You don't want to be out in a club ever again. You don't want to be drinking all night because, you can't get up the next morning with a hangover. All these things happen when you're older. So when you're younger, enjoy life. And enjoying life obviously doesn't mean just having sex all the time. Of course not. But enjoying life is not just about going out and partying. It's about discovering yourself. Because if you go out and meet more people and meet more cultures and gain more life experience, even travel if you can. Honestly, my big advice to anybody in the world is to travel more. Just travel and see the world, meet different people, eat strange foods, speak with people who don't speak your language. Just interact with the world, because we see the news and we see how horrendous everything is all over, all the time. But when you go to different countries and meet real people, you see that actually most people are just beautiful and they're just like you and I. And it's not all the doom and gloom that you see on the news. The majority of the population of Earth are just people. And when you're meeting all these new people and traveling to different countries and eating all this strange food that you love but you don't even know the name of, you're gaining more life experience. And so if you met your sweetheart in high school, let's just go with you are 16, you've met the man of your dreams or the woman of your dreams in high school, and you get together. And for this example, let's say it's man and woman. So you've met your partner, you've started dating, you get serious, and 2 years down the line, you have a child, and so you're now 18 with a child, then you get married, or maybe you got married before that, and now you've got 60, 70, 80 years left together. And the chances of you meeting that one person who you will resonate with so much that you want to spend the rest of your life with is so infinitesimally small that they are the same person who was in maths class with you. There are 8 billion people on the planet. So if you go man and woman, that's 4 billion people to choose from, in theory. I mean, obviously not, but even a couple of hundred people to choose from is from all over the world. And if you spend more time in your youth just gaining more life experience, meeting more people and discovering not just who they are, but who you are, because who you are as you grow up changes. You will always be the base version of yourself, but with more information and more education and more life experience, you change who you are. And so from the age of 16 to 26, you would be you are still a kid at 16, but at 26, you're an adult. And, in those 10 years, you could have done so much, absolutely so much. And your whole worldview may have changed in those 10 years. And so if you waited to settle down with somebody until you knew you were emotionally ready to settle down, then I think you've got a better chance of a relationship lasting a lifetime. And also, when you're bringing children into the world, if you'd waited until your late 20s instead of your late teens, you have more to impart on your children. You have more emotional maturity with your children. You have more education. You have more information to give to those children. And surely those children will have a brighter life with you in a more settled position and being able to help them in the world. And, you're with your worldview now, as opposed to it was when you were still at school. Again, this is just my feelings on this. I'm a gay man. I don't have any children. I am married, but I don't have any children. I just think it would be better for you, better for your partner, better for the sustainability of a relationship, and better for your kids if you choose to have them. But again, just my views. But I'm a big believer in living your life and loving what you live. And we all know this is our one shot at life. And for some people, all they want is kids and marriage, and that's amazing. If that's what you want in life, you should definitely go out and do that. And if you can sustain that relationship throughout your entire life, then brilliant. But I think this is why we have such high divorce rates, is because people fall in love early in their life, believe that's the only love they'll ever have, and then when it all falls apart, then they're scrambling to find love in later life with the only knowledge they have of that one relationship they had that's now fallen apart. Whereas if they'd waited, until they were ready and more mature, then maybe it would have stayed together. And then you also have to think about monogamy. For the majority of my adult life, I didn't believe in monogamy. My parents were both late teens when they had me, when they got pregnant, and they married in their teens. They had me when they were 20, and they were divorced 20 years later. And so I grew up with this knowledge. I grew up in a world where I had parents that weren't compatible and obviously got married and had kids far too early in their life. And so I always believed that monogamy wasn't real. And why should anybody have to stay with one partner for all their life? But then I met Ken 9 years ago, and we're monogamous. And it's because I've been through my child years, is what I like to think of my 20s, where I was still growing, and I did all of that. I had different partners and different relationships, and I grew from each one until I got to this state of maturity where I was totally ready to have a monogamous relationship and be happy in that relationship. And we are sickeningly happy. And I never get tired of his company. During lockdown, we spent 14 months together, trapped in a basement flat with no light and mold on the walls. And yet our relationship grew. We just work so well together. But that only came from me being older and him being older and having the maturity to be that couple. And I just feel that for some people, not all, but for some people, they need to realize that love isn't just in one person. You may be really in love with somebody, but if something isn't working, if something isn't right and it isn't resolvable in that relationship, don't stay with them just because you're in love with them, thinking that you'll never find love again, because you will. And there's daily proof in this. I mean, just look at anybody in the world, with anyone who's been in a relationship before and then now in a second relationship or a third or whatever. Love isn't just tied to you and one other person. Love is all over, and everyone is capable of love. Everyone has love in their hearts. And for the majority of the world, they are just filled with love. So don't be afraid to share your love. And also don't be afraid to think that this isn't working. I don't like being in this relationship, but I have to stay with them. You don't need to. I mean, in some situations, maybe you do. Maybe you've got kids, or maybe financially you can't leave, or something like that. But if you don't have those, don't feel like you're trapped, because again, one life. This is your one life. Enjoy it as much as you can. And if you have love for someone, but you are more friends, or it's something just, you're fighting all the time, or whatever it is, then maybe it's time to think, okay, maybe we stop this and move on to something else. I feel like an agony aunt now, but you know what I'm trying to say. Don't stay with someone just because you think you won't find love again, because you will. There's love everywhere in the world, for everyone. For me, I love love, and I'm a huge romantic, and I, I've been in love with many people, but I didn't realize what true love was until I met Ken. I always thought love at first sight was a Disney myth, but it turns out that it's true. It wasn't actually at first sight, but it was on first date, and I was in love with him from our first date. Just seeing him and being with him and spending time with him, and it was just wonderful. And I knew straight away that I was in love with him. But of course, you can't declare love on a first date. People just think you're weird. I told him on the second, and he thought I was weird. But it's true. I mean, I did feel that intense emotion. And I guess back then it was more infatuation. It wasn't really love. I didn't know enough about him. But we spent so much time together. Even from our first date was on the weekend, and then we saw each other twice in the following week, and then we spent the next weekend together, and so on and so on. And 10 months later, I proposed to him. 3.5 years later, we were married, and we've now been together for 9 years. And, we own a house together. We spend most of our days together because we both work from home, and we love each other intensely. And it's lovely. But it wasn't perfect at the beginning. At the beginning of our relationship, we fought a lot. We would have weekly arguments, and like really intense arguments. And because of the cultural differences, he's from Singapore, I'm from England, and we both grew up with different views on life and very different life experiences. I was under the impression before I met Ken that I would have to eventually settle down with someone from Yorkshire, or maybe just someone from England. I dated people from different countries before, but I never expected to settle down with someone without my shared history, thinking that it would be really difficult. But actually, it turns out that when you meet someone from a different country and you do get involved and it does become serious, then yeah, it's actually amazing. I can say, oh, I used to watch this when I was a kid, and then show it to Ken. He's like, oh my goodness, that's amazing, or that's terrible, or how did you ever watch this? But then he'll show me stuff from his childhood, and so we actually have more to talk about and more to share with each other. And I never contemplated that before. But at the beginning, because of our different outlooks on life, we clashed a lot. He didn't get different words I used and different phrases, and took offense to things that weren't meant to be offensive, and I'd do the same from him. And instead of saying, ugh, when you're in the middle of an argument, you just say, oh, just go away, I'm right, you're wrong, and then storm off. But we never did that. Instead, we sat down, sometimes for hours, and discussed in fine detail what the problem was and why we clashed in the first place and how we could resolve it. And we only could do that because we were older and more mature and emotionally mature to be able to do that. And for over a year, we would have these regular arguments, and we would then sit down and talk about them at length, and we wouldn't stop talking until they were resolved. And now, years later, we hardly ever argue, and when we do, it's over something stupid. We only argued twice during lockdown, bearing in mind we were together for 14 months without going outside. And one of those was about him not recharging the batteries in the controller. I mean, just stupid things. That's the only thing we argue about now. And they don't last long because we know each other and we love each other intensely. And so it's like arguing with yourself in effect. But our relationship, we worked on a lot right at the very beginning, and now we are at the point where it's the perfect relationship. for both of us. He is my perfect partner, and together we work perfectly as a unit. But it's at work. And again, this just came from life experience and emotional maturity. I had never done that with anyone else before. I usually just stormed out or told them to go out or whatever. But sitting down and talking, and it's not easy. It is not easy when you're really, because you know what it feels like, the anger that clogs your brain and the feeling of intense hatred or anger. And you think the best thing to do is just to walk away and calm down. But once you've calmed down, you don't discuss it again. And so it never gets resolved. And that's why we did this. And it worked. It might not work for anyone else, but this is what worked for us. And I think it's worth trying. If you are in a relationship where you don't feel it's working, then maybe try just discussing why you don't think it's working. And it might be that that's all it needed to make it into a much better relationship. And if it doesn't work, then maybe it's not the right relationship for you. There are, like I said, billions of people on this planet, and everyone is capable of love. And yeah, you don't have to stay in a relationship if it's just not working. You don't. There's love everywhere. And so that's my little episode on love, really. I just wanted to share my thoughts. I know this is relationship advice from a gay man. I mean, what do I know? And it's just my personal views. But yeah, I really love love. And I want everyone to experience that. And I want everyone to be the best person they can be and be happy as that person and happy in a relationship. And yeah, so maybe some of this helped, maybe all of it's absolute rubbish, and that's fine as well. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you join me again next week. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.